There is a weather phenomenon in the Great Smoky Mountains that the locals do not have a name for. It is not rain, and it is not quite fog. It is simply a presence, a heaviness that descends from the canopy and swallows the world whole. Usually, fog is gray or white. It is the color of clouds. But sometimes, deep in the rhododendron tunnels, the air turns a different color, a sick, pale green. I walked into that green air on a Tuesday morning. My watch said it was 8 a.m. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of silence and wet leaves. But when I tripped over a root and fell out the other side, the sun was setting, and my beard had grown 3 days' worth of stubble. Let me tell you about the time I lost inside the cloud. The topographic map is a lie. It tries to reduce the world to 2 dimensions. It tries to explain the chaos of the mountains with neat brown contour lines. Interval, 40 feet. Scale, 1 to 24,000. But when you are actually standing there, at the base of a ridge that rises like a green wall into the sky, you realize that the map is just a suggestion. I folded the paper map. It was a waterproof USGS quadrangle, worn soft at the creases from years of use. I slid it into the cargo pocket of my pants. Swish. The time was 7:45 a.m. The location was deep in the Unicoi Mountains, a rugged sub-range of the southern Appalachians. I was not on the Appalachian Trail. I was not on the Benton-MacKaye. I was on a Manway. In the vocabulary of these mountains, a manway is a ghost trail. It is a path that used to exist. Maybe it was a logging grade from the 1920s. Maybe it was a herd path for cattle. Maybe it was just a deer run that humans adopted. The Forest Service does not maintain them. They do not blaze the trees with white or blue paint. They let the forest take them back, and the forest is hungry. I adjusted the hip belt of my pack. It was a light load today. Day pack, 3 liters of water, rain shell, first aid kit, lunch, total weight, 18 pounds. I could feel the familiar pressure on my iliac crest, a grounding sensation. I looked at the wall of vegetation ahead of me, rhododendron maximum. The locals call these thickets rhododendron hells. It is an accurate name. The branches twist and interlock like wrestling snakes. The leaves are thick, leathery, and dark green. They block out the sun. They trap the humidity. To enter a rhododendron tunnel is to leave the open air and enter a biodome. I checked my compass. A Sunto MC2 mirror compass. I opened the case. The needle swung freely in the damping fluid, settling on north. My bearing was 105 degrees, east-southeast. According to the old logging maps, the Manway should cut straight through the thicket and emerge on the ridge line 2 miles up. I took a breath. The air was already heavy. It tasted of damp earth, rotting logs, and the sweet, cloying scent of galax leaves. It was going to be a hot day. Footsteps, crunching leaves. I stepped off the gravel service road and into the brush. The transition was instant. One moment, I was in the bright, harsh morning sunlight. The next, I was in the shade. The temperature didn't drop, but the light changed. It became diffuse, filtered. The ground under my boots was soft. Decades of fallen leaves turning into peat. Soft, soft, soft. It is a quiet way to walk. The sound of the outside world, the distant hum of the highway, the wind in the upper canopy. It all muffled instantly. Here, inside the tunnel, the only sound was the buzz of insects, cicadas. They were revving up for the day, a high, electric whine that rose and fell in. Waves, zzz, zzz. It is a hypnotic sound, monotonous. If you listen to it long enough, your brain stops registering it as noise and starts registering it as silence. I moved slowly. You have to move slowly in a Manway. You have to watch your footing. Roots snake across the path, hidden under the leaf litter. Slick, mossy rocks wait to twist an ankle. Left foot, test the weight, commit. Right foot, test the weight, commit. I pushed aside a branch of mountain laurel. It sprang back behind me with a swish. The trail was faint, barely a depression in the earth. Sometimes it disappeared entirely, swallowed by a patch of ferns, and I had to stop and look for the cut of the land, a flat spot on a slope, a gap in the trees, the subtle geometry of human interference. I checked my watch again. 12 a.m. I had been walking for almost 30 minutes. The sweat was starting to prickle on my forehead. I could feel a single drop trace a line down my temple. I wiped it away with the back of my glove. The air felt still, stagnant. Usually, on these ridges, there is a breeze. The air moves up the slope as the sun heats the valley. But not today. The leaves around me hung perfectly motionless. Not a tremble, not a flutter. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. I stopped to drink. I unclipped the hose of my hydration bladder. I bit the valve. The water was lukewarm, tasting faintly of plastic, but it was wet. Glug, glug, glug. I swallowed hard. As I lowered the hose, I noticed something about the light. Ahead of me, the tunnel of rhododendrons seemed to be getting lighter, brighter, but not with sunlight. Sunlight is yellow. Sunlight has hard edges. This light was soft, hazy, and it was distinctly green. I thought it was just the sun hitting a patch of particularly bright leaves, or maybe pollen in the air. I checked the map again. I should be nearing a gap, a low point in the ridge called _1_ low points collect moisture. Low points collect fog. It makes sense, I told myself. It is just a pocket of morning mist that hasn't burned off yet. I put the map away. I kept walking, toward the light. The cicadas seemed to be getting louder, or maybe just more intense. Their buzzing started to synchronize, a pulsing rhythm. Pulse, pause, pulse, pause. The air grew cooler, just a fraction. A subtle drop in temperature that raised the hair on my arms. The path ahead straightened out. The twisted branches of the rhododendrons pulled back, opening up a corridor, and filling that corridor, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, was the mist. It wasn't white. It was the color of sea glass, a pale, verdant green. It didn't look like gas. It looked like a liquid suspended in the air. Thick, opaque. It hung there, perfectly still, a curtain drawn across the trail. I stopped 5 feet from the edge of it. I could see the distinct line where the clear air ended and the green air began. It was as sharp as a doorway. I stood there for a long moment, listening. The cicadas stopped, instantly, as if someone had cut a wire. Silence rushed in to fill the void. I should have turned around. In hindsight, the silence was the warning. Nature is never silent. Even in winter, there is the wind. There is the creak of wood. But this was the silence of a recording studio. Dead air. But I was a hiker. I was on a bearing. The ridge was on the other side. I reasoned with myself. It is just fog. It is just light filtering through chlorophyll. It is physics. I took a deep breath. I stepped forward, left foot, right foot, into the green. The transition was physical. It felt like walking through a spider web, but without the sticky strands, just a sudden, subtle resistance against my skin. And then I was inside. The first thing I noticed was the acoustic shift. Outside, my boots had crunched on the dry leaves. Crunch, snap. Inside, the sound was deadened. It sounded flat, like walking on a thick wool carpet in a small room. Thump, thump, thump. The sound didn't travel. It fell straight to the ground and died there. I stopped and listened. Nothing. No wind, no birds, no distant hum of the world. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed trapped inside my head. Inhale, exhale. It was intimate. Too intimate. I looked around. The visibility dropped instantly. 10 feet, maybe 15. Beyond that, everything dissolved into a uniform, glowing green haze. The trees that were close to me, the rhododendrons, the gnarled oaks, they were clear, hyper-real. I could see the texture of the lichen on the bark, gray and crusty. I could see the veins in the leaves, but they had no depth. Without shadows, the world looked flat. The light was coming from everywhere at once. It was omnidirectional. There was no sun, no source. The air itself was luminous. It bathed everything in that sick aquarium light. My hands looked pale. My blue jacket looked teal. The colors were wrong, shifted on the spectrum. I checked my compass. Force of habit. When visual references vanish, trust the instrument. I held it up flat in my palm. The needle, the magnetic, north-seeking arrow, was behaving strangely. It wasn't spinning wildly like in the movies. That would be dramatic. This was worse. It was sluggish. It drifted slowly to the left, then drifted slowly to the right, like it was floating in molasses. It couldn't find the pole. It was confused. I tapped the glass. Tap, tap. No change. The needle just floated there. Aimless. Underscore, quote, underscore, two, underscore, I whispered. My voice sounded muffled, like I was speaking through a pillow. Underscore, quote, underscore, three, underscore. The trail was still visible at my feet, a faint depression in the moss. I kept walking. Kick step, glide. I focused on the ground, one step at a time. The air tasted different here. It didn't smell like earth anymore. It smelled clean, sterile. Like ozone, or static electricity, or the smell of a copy machine running in a small room. It coated the back of my throat, a metallic tang. I walked for what felt like 10 minutes. The scenery didn't change. Rhododendron branch on the left, mossy rock on the right, green fog everywhere. It was repetitive, strangely repetitive. I passed a large, dead hemlock tree. Its bark was stripped away, the wood bleached white like bone. It leaned over the path at a 45-degree angle, a distinct landmark. I noted it. Quote 4 I mentally logged. I kept walking, kick step, glide. The rhythm was soothing. It lulled the panic that was starting to knock on the door of my mind. Just keep moving. The ridge is ahead. You can't miss a ridge. Gravity doesn't lie. If I am walking uphill, I am going the right way. I focused on the slope. Yes, it was an incline. My calves could feel it. Up. Always up. Another 5 minutes passed. Or maybe it was 10. It was hard to judge. Without the sun moving, without shadows lengthening, time felt slippery. It felt like I was walking on a treadmill. And then, I saw it. Ahead of me. Emerging from the green soup. A shape. Tall. Leaning. White. I stopped. It was a tree. A large, dead hemlock tree. Bark stripped away, leaning over the path at a 45-degree angle. I stood there, staring at it. It looked familiar. It looked exactly like the tree I had passed 10 minutes ago. Quote 5, I muttered. I walked up to it. I touched the wood. It was cold, damp. There was a knot in the wood, shaped like an eye. I remembered that knot. I had passed this tree. Had I walked in a circle? I looked down at the trail. It was straight. No forks, no turns. I had been walking uphill the entire time. How can you walk in a straight line, uphill, and end up back where you started? Geometry doesn't work that way, unless the space itself is curved. A cold drop of condensation ran down the back of my neck. I shivered. The green fog seemed to press closer. The sphere of visibility was shrinking. 10 feet became 8. 8 became 6. The world was closing in. I looked at my watch. I wanted to know how much time I had wasted on this loop. I raised my wrist. The digital display of my Casio was blank. Not off, blank, faded out, as if the battery had died instantly. I tapped the screen. Nothing. I looked at the second hand of my backup analog dial. It was twitching. Tick, back, tick, back. It was trying to move forward, but something was pushing it back, stuck in a single second, over and over again. I dropped my arm. I was alone. I was blind, and I was timeless. The only thing that existed was the green and the trail. I had no choice. I adjusted my pack. I stepped over the root of the dead hemlock tree, and I kept walking. Walking becomes a state of being. Left foot, right foot, breathe. Left foot, right foot, breathe. I stopped checking for landmarks. What is the point of a landmark if the land itself is fluid? I stopped looking for the ridge. I just walked. The fog grew thicker, or maybe denser is the right word. It felt like I was wading through green water. It beaded on my eyelashes. Tiny, microscopic spheres of moisture. Every time I blinked, the world smeared. Blink, blur, blink, focus. My clothes were damp, not soaked, just heavy. The fabric of my shirt clung to my skin, cold, clammy. It felt like the fog was trying to digest me, slowly, turning me into part of the landscape. I tried to think about the world outside. My car, parked at the trailhead. The coffee I had bought at the gas station this morning. My apartment, the stack of mail on the counter. These things felt abstract, like memories from a book I had read years ago. Did they exist? Or was there only this tunnel? This endless, green, rhododendron tunnel? I started counting my steps, to keep my mind tethered, to impose some kind of order on the chaos. 1, 2, 3, 100, 500, 1,000. At 2,000 steps, I should have covered a mile. At a mile, the terrain should have changed. But it didn't. Same moss, same rocks, same silence. The silence was heavy now. It had a weight. It pressed against my eardrums. I found myself humming a low note, just to make sure I could still hear. Quote 6. The sound vibrated in my chest, but it didn't leave my body. The fog ate it instantly. I began to notice the small things. Hyperfocus, the way a fern curled at the tip, a perfect Fibonacci spiral, the way the water droplets clung to the spiderwebs. Wait. Spiderwebs. I stopped. I leaned in close to a branch. There was a web, intricate, beautiful. But the spider was sitting in the center. It wasn't moving. It wasn't dead. It was just paused. Its legs were tensed, ready to strike, but it was frozen. I blew on it gently. Whoo! The web didn't vibrate. The spider didn't react. It was like a photograph, a 3D sculpture trapped in time. I looked at the water droplet next to it. It was hanging from the tip of a leaf, elongated, heavy, ready to fall. But it didn't fall. It just hung there, defying gravity, suspended in the amber of the moment. I pulled back. My heart began to hammer. Thump, thump, thump. If the spider is stopped, if the water is stopped, am I stopped? I looked at my hand. I flexed my fingers. They moved. I touched my face. I could feel the stubble. I could feel the warmth of my skin. I was moving. I was the variable. I was the only thing moving in a static painting. I was a glitch in the video file. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to run, to shatter the stillness, to force the world to react. But I knew, instinctively, that running was dangerous. If I ran, I might slip. If I slipped, I might fall. And if I fell and stopped moving, would I freeze too? Would I become just another statue in the Green Museum? No. Keep moving. Motion is life. I forced my legs to work. They felt heavy. Lead weights, kick step, glide. I walked past the frozen spider. I walked past the suspended drop of water. I walked into the nothingness. Time dissolved. Was it hours? Was it days? My legs didn't feel tired. That was the strangest part. I should have been exhausted. I should have been thirsty. But my body felt preserved, like the spider. I was operating on a different clock. I was in the Null State, where the only direction is forward, and the only time is now. Forward, into the green, always into the green. The tunnel seemed to be narrowing. The rhododendrons were leaning closer, touching my shoulders, brushing my pack. Swish, swish, like fingers, guiding me or hurting me. I didn't know. I just kept walking. The first signal came from inside. My stomach growled. It was a loud, wet sound that tore through the silence of the green corridor. Grrr, rumble. I stopped. I put a hand on my abdomen. Why was I hungry? I had eaten a heavy breakfast of oatmeal and peanut butter before I started. According to my internal clock, I had been walking for maybe an hour, maybe 90 minutes. You don't get starvation pangs after 90 minutes. But this wasn't just an appetite. This was a hollow, aching emptiness. The kind of hunger you feel after a full day of hard labor. My blood sugar felt low. My hands were starting to tremble. I swung my pack off my shoulder. The movement felt sluggish. I unzipped the main compartment. Zip! I dug out a granola bar, oats and honey. I tore the wrapper. The sound was deafening, like cracking a whip. I took a bite. It tasted like nothing. Texture. Yes. Crunch. Yes. But no flavor. It was like eating dry sawdust. I chewed mechanically. Swallow. I took a drink from my hydration hose. Suck. Sputter. Hiss. Empty. I froze. I had 3 liters of water in that bladder. 3 liters. That is enough for 8 hours of hiking in high heat. I had taken... what? 4 sips? I pulled the bladder out of the pack. It was flat. Vacuum sealed against itself. Bone dry. Quote 7, I whispered. Quote 8, I dropped the empty bag on the moss. I brought my hands up to my face. I rubbed my cheeks. Friction. Roughness. My fingers traced the line of my jaw. I didn't feel skin. I felt hair. Coarse, thick, wiry hair. I ran my tongue over my upper lip. A mustache. I don't wear a beard. I had shaved this morning. Smooth. Clean. Now, I had at least 3 days of growth. Maybe 4. A heavy, scratchy stubble covering my neck and chin. I stood there in the green twilight, clutching my face. The math crashed down on me. If the water is gone, if the beard is grown, then I haven't been walking for an hour. I have been walking for days. Sleeping walking? Comatose? While my mind was trapped in the loop of the last 10 minutes, my body had been marching through this corridor for 72 hours or more. I looked at my legs. They should be broken. They should be collapsing. But they weren't. They felt preserved, pickled in the green fog. The fog. I looked at it closely. It had changed. It wasn't just air anymore. It had thickened. It pressed against my clothes like a heavy quilt. I reached out and pushed my hand forward. I could feel the resistance. It was viscous, like moving through aerogel. The green light was darker now, deeper, like the bottom of a pond. A thought bloomed in my mind. Calm, cold, rational. I am being digested. The forest is not just a place. It is an organism. And I am the nutrient. It has slowed me down. It has anesthetized me with monotony. And now, it is breaking me down. Time is the acid. I felt a wave of drowsiness, so heavy. It would be so easy to sit down, to lean against the mossy bank, to close my eyes and let the green fill my lungs, to become like the spider, frozen, perfect, eternal. No. The survival instinct is a lizard brain function. It doesn't care about philosophy. It cares about blood flow. It kicked me, hard. Adrenaline spiked in my chest. Move! You have to move. If you stop now, you become part of the fossil record. I grabbed my empty pack. I didn't bother to zip it. I turned away from the seductive softness of the moss. I faced the trail. The green wall was solid now, opaque. I lowered my head. I gritted my teeth, and I pushed. I didn't walk, I waded, pushing against the weight of the air, fighting the friction of time. 1 step, 2 steps. I was swimming toward the surface. I didn't walk out of the green corridor. I fell out. I was pushing against the resistance, leaning my entire body weight forward, like a man trying to open a heavy steel door. And then, the door just disappeared. My right boot caught on something solid, a root, a simple, gnarly hickory root protruding from the earth. The most mundane thing in the world. It broke the spell. I tripped. Gravity, which had been merely a suggestion for the last hour, suddenly returned with a vengeance. I pitched forward. I felt a sensation of tearing. Not my clothes, the air. It felt like I was ripping through a wet shower curtain, a membrane of surface tension. Rip. And then, impact. I hit the ground hard. My knees slammed into the dirt. My palms skidded across gravel. Pain. Sharp, hot, undeniable pain. I gasped. The air rushed into my lungs. But it wasn't the metallic, ozone taste of the corridor. It was dry. It was dusty. It smelled of pine sap and heated rock. I squeezed my eyes shut against the sudden assault of sensation. The silence was gone. In its place was a wall of noise, the wind roaring through the canopy, a crow calling out, harsh and angry. Caw, caw. The distant, beautiful drone of a jet engine high in the stratosphere. I rolled over onto my back. I opened my eyes. I flinched. The light was blinding, but it wasn't green. It was gold, deep, rich, burning amber. The sun was low on the horizon, cutting through the trees at a sharp angle. Sunset, I croaked. My voice was wrecked, dry, cracked. Like I hadn't used it in a week. I coughed, clearing the phantom fluid from my throat. I sat up. I was on a logging road, the gravel service road where I had started. I looked behind me. There was the rhododendron thicket. It looked normal. Dark leaves, twisted branches, deep shadows. There was no green glow, no wall of mist, just a dense patch of brush. I scrambled to my feet. My legs trembled violently. The preservation effect was wearing off, and the exhaustion was crashing in like a tidal wave. My muscles screamed. My joints ached. I stumbled toward my car, visible about 100 yards down the road. It was the only car left in the pull-off. It looked dusty. A layer of yellow pollen coated the windshield. Wait, I had washed the car on Sunday. Pollen doesn't accumulate that fast. I fumbled for my keys. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped them twice. Clatter. I unlocked the door. I fell into the driver's seat. The safety of the upholstery, the smell of old coffee, the familiarity of the dashboard. I turned the key. The digital clock on the dash flickered to life. 7:42 p.m. Okay, sunset. Then I looked at the date. Friday. I stared at the glowing letters, F-R-I. I had entered the Manway on Tuesday morning. I had walked for maybe 2 hours, 3, but the world had turned 3 times. I had been gone for 84 hours. I reached up and touched my face again. The beard was real. The hunger was real. The pollen was real. I looked back at the woods one last time. The trees stood silent, watching. They didn't look malicious. They looked indifferent. They had eaten 3 days of my life, digested them, and then spat me out because I tripped. I didn't wait. I put the car in gear. I drove. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the tires on the pavement. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. But even now, safe in my bed, with the lights on, if I close my eyes, I can still see the green. And I can still hear the silence of the spider.